The silent battlefield. The war between humans and the Zarkans had been expected for years. The Zarkans were a powerful species, feared across the galaxy. They had conquered many planets, destroying anything that stood in their way. Now, their eyes were on Earth. But something strange happened. The humans did not attack. They did not send warships or soldiers. Instead, they sent one man, Captain Daniel Reeves. The Zarkans were confused. Why would humans send a diplomat instead of warriors? Did they think words could stop war? The Zarkan leader, Supreme Commander Vortok, laughed when he heard this. They are weak, Vortok growled. They fear us. But deep down, something felt wrong. The humans had fought wars before. They had faced destruction and survived. They were not known for surrendering. And so, the meeting was set. A single ship from Earth arrived at Station Zyros, a neutral battleground. Inside, Reeves stood alone, waiting. The doors slid open. 5 Zarkan warriors entered, each over 8 feet tall, their armored bodies covered in scars from past battles. Behind them, Vortok walked in, his red eyes locked onto Reeves. Reeves did not move. He did not show fear. He simply nodded and spoke. Supreme Commander Vortok, thank you for meeting me. The Zarkans were expecting fear, but there was none in Reeves' voice. His tone was calm, his body relaxed. This unsettled them. You are here to surrender? Vortok asked, his voice filled with amusement. Reeves shook his head. No, I am here to stop a war before it begins. The Zarkan warriors laughed. They had fought for centuries. They had never met an enemy that sought peace before battle. You think words will save you? Vortok leaned closer. Your species is fragile. You are nothing but dust beneath our feet. Reeves met his gaze without flinching. Then why haven't you crushed us yet? The laughter stopped. The room became silent. The Zarkans did not have an answer. Reeves continued, because you fear something. Vortok growled, we fear nothing. But the truth was, the Zarkans did fear something. They feared the unknown. Humans were different. They did not fight like other species. They did not act with pure aggression or blind rage. They were calculating. They were patient. And patience was a weapon more dangerous than any warship. Reeves took a step forward, unafraid of the towering warriors around him. You see us as weak, he said, but do you know why we are still here? Why our species has survived? The Zarkans listened, but they did not answer. Reeves smiled. Because we learned something no other species has. Vortok narrowed his eyes. And what is that? Reeves' voice was steady. We learned that war is not the greatest power in the universe. Wisdom is. The Zarkans scoffed. Wisdom? That is not power. Power is crushing your enemies. Power is taking what you want. Reeves shook his head. Then tell me, Commander, how many enemies have you made? Vortok clenched his fists. Many. And how many allies? Silence. Reeves nodded. That is why your empire will fall. The words were simple, but they shook the room like an explosion. The Zarkans did not show emotion, but Reeves could see the tension in their bodies. Humans were different. They fought wars, but not for conquest. They fought to survive. And when they fought, they did not fight alone. Reeves spoke again, his voice low but firm. You think we are alone. You think we stand without allies. But you are wrong. Vortok frowned. Lies. No one would fight for your kind. Reeves pulled a small device from his pocket and pressed a button. A hologram appeared in the air. Images of different alien species filled the room, species that had once been enemies of humanity. But now, they stood with humanity. Reeves looked at Vortok. We did not conquer them. We did not destroy them. We stood with them. We fought together. We survived together. The Zarkans shifted uncomfortably. No empire had ever done this before. Conquering was easy, but earning loyalty, That was something different. Reeves took a deep breath. You have a choice, Commander. You can fight us, but you will not fight just us. You will fight every species that stands beside us, and even if you destroy us, something greater will rise from the ashes. Vortok's eyes burned with rage. You dare threaten me? Reeves shook his head. No, I only tell the truth. The room fell into silence once again. For the first time in his life, Supreme Commander Vortok was unsure. The humans were supposed to be weak, but this man, standing alone, showed no fear. And that was terrifying. Reeves turned to leave. Think carefully, Commander, because the next time we meet, the choice will be gone. With those final words, Reeves stepped out of the room. The Zarkan warriors remained still. No one spoke. No one moved. Because, in that moment, a terrifying realization dawned upon them. Humans were not weak. They were something far more dangerous. They were wise. And wisdom, in the right hands, was more powerful than any weapon. The weapon they never expected. The great halls of Station Zyros were built for war. The cold metal walls, the towering pillars, the battle-worn banners of fallen enemies, all of it was designed to remind visitors of one simple truth. The Zarkans do not negotiate. And yet, here they were, listening. Commander Vortok sat in silence, his massive fingers gripping the armrests of his throne-like chair. His war council surrounded him, their sharp eyes locked onto the holographic display in the center of the room. The image flickered, alien faces, species that had once fought against humanity, now standing beside them. It made no sense. The Zarkans had spent centuries building their empire through force. They crushed their enemies, took what they wanted, and burned the rest. That was power. That was survival. But humans had done something different. They had made allies. A low growl rumbled in Vortok's chest. This is deception. Across from him, Captain Daniel Reeves stood calmly, hands behind his back. He showed no fear, no sign of weakness. No, Reeves said, this is history. You just never paid attention. A deep silence filled the room. No one had ever spoken to Vortok like that before. No one had dared. A Zarkan general, Korak the Destroyer, slammed his fist on the table. Enough of this nonsense. We should crush them now. Reeves raised an eyebrow. And then what? Korak bared his teeth. And then you are gone. Reeves smiled slightly, shaking his head. No, you still don't understand. He stepped forward and pressed another button on his device. The hologram changed. A battlefield. Zarkan warships in flames. Cities crumbling. A war not yet fought, but already lost. This, Reeves said, his voice steady, is what happens if you attack us. The War Council stared at the image. The simulation was terrifyingly detailed. Zarkan ships destroyed. Their empire fractured. This is a lie, one of the commanders shouted. Reeves' expression did not change. You think we created this? You think we just guessed what would happen? He tapped the screen again. Lines of data appeared, predictive models, battle strategies, war outcomes, not predictions, calculations. This isn't about hope or fear, Reeves continued. It's math. It's probability. We've seen this before. We've fought wars that should have destroyed us, but we survived, every time. He looked directly at Vortok. You are stronger than us. You have more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. You think that means you'll win. But history doesn't work that way. Vortok's jaw tightened. Explain. Reeves nodded. Strength alone doesn't win wars. Wisdom does. Strategy does. Unity does. Another tap on his device. Another set of images. The fall of the Selrathi Empire. The collapse of the Tyrannus Dominion. The ruins of the Gornax Armada. All great empires, all of them destroyed. Do you know what they had in common? Reeves asked. The room was silent. They thought strength was enough. The weight of his words filled the air like a storm. The Zarkans were warriors, but they were not fools. They had conquered many, but they had also studied history, and history was cruel to those who ignored it. Korak growled, "And what do you suggest? That we bow to you? That we become like these weaklings who follow you?" Reeves shook his head. "No, I suggest you make the choice that no empire before you has ever made." He stepped closer, looking Vortok in the eye. "I suggest you survive." The words hung in the air, sharp as a blade. Vortok's claws tapped against the metal of his throne. His mind raced. This human was dangerous, not because he carried a weapon, but because he didn't need one. And that terrified him. For the first time in his life, Vortok saw something more powerful than war. And it was standing right in front of him. The Zarkan dilemma. The silence inside the war chamber was heavier than the gravity of a dying star. For the first time in Zarkan history, Supreme Commander Vortok did not have an immediate answer. His war council, veterans of 1,000 battles, conquerors of entire star systems, sat frozen, not from fear of battle, but from something far worse: doubt. Captain Daniel Reeves had done something no enemy had ever done before. He had forced the Zarkans to think. Vortok's claws tapped against the armrest of his throne. He could feel the eyes of his commanders on him, waiting, watching. The Zarkan way was simple. War was survival. War was life. But now, a single human had turned that belief into a question. And questions were dangerous. Across the room, General Korak, the destroyer, stood abruptly. His towering frame cast a long shadow over the chamber. "This is nonsense," Korak growled. His voice was like thunder in a storm. "This human fills the air with meaningless words while our fleets wait for battle." He turned to Vortok, his eyes burning. "Enough of this. Give the order. Let us end them." Reeves remained calm. He did not flinch under Korak's fury. Instead, he spoke in the same steady voice. "Go ahead." Korak paused. "What?" Reeves stepped forward, standing between the Zarkan warriors, unarmed, outnumbered, and yet completely fearless. "Attack Earth," Reeves said. "Send every warship you have." He glanced at the holographic map of the galaxy. "You will take our cities. You will kill millions. And then you will lose." Korak snarled. "You dare." Reeves cut him off. "I dare because I know what happens next. You don't." The War Council shifted uncomfortably. Reeves continued. "Humanity doesn't win wars because we're stronger. We don't have the biggest fleet. We don't have the best weapons." His eyes locked onto Korak's. "We win because we learn. Every loss teaches us. Every defeat makes us stronger. We adapt. And the enemies who underestimate us always regret it." Korak bared his teeth. "Enough of your cowards' talk." He turned to Vortok. "Commander, if we delay, we look weak." Vortok remained silent. That silence was dangerous. Korak slammed his fist on the table. "We are warriors. We do not hesitate." A new voice spoke. "We hesitated before." All eyes turned toward High Scholar Zelver, the oldest Zarkan in the chamber. His skin was marked with deep scars, but unlike the warriors, his battles were fought with wisdom, not weapons. He leaned forward. "There was a time when we faced extinction. Do you remember, Supreme Commander?" Vortok's expression did not change, but his grip on the throne tightened. "Yes," Zelver said, answering his own question. "The Selrathi War." The War Council grew silent. It was an old wound, but a deep one. The Selrathi had almost wiped out the Zarkans long ago. The only reason the Empire survived was because they had adapted. They had changed, just as humans had. Zelver turned to Korak. "You say we do not hesitate, but our greatest victory came when we did." Korak looked furious but said nothing. Zelver turned back to Vortok. His voice was low but firm. "If we attack, we may win this war. But if the human speaks the truth, then we may lose something far greater. The council did not speak. Reeves watched them carefully. He knew this was the moment that would decide the future. He took a breath. You have a choice, Commander Vortok. He stepped closer, unafraid of the warriors around him. You can fight, or you can be the first leader in Zarkan history to do something greater. The warlord's red eyes met Reeves. Reeves spoke the final words that would haunt Vortok's mind for the rest of his life. You can choose to evolve. The room was silent. For the first time in history, the Zarkans were no longer sure what to do. The echoes of war. The stars outside Station Zyros burned silently, distant and eternal, as if watching the fate of two civilizations unfold. Inside the war chamber, Supreme Commander Vortok sat motionless. The weight of his empire's history pressed down on him like the gravity of a dying sun. For centuries, the Zarkans had ruled through fire and steel. The idea of peace had always been a weakness, a myth for lesser species. But now, that myth stood before him. Captain Daniel Reeves, the unarmed human who had shaken the foundations of war. Yet, despite everything, despite the wisdom Reeves had shown, there was still doubt. Could war really be avoided? Before Vortok could speak, a loud beeping sound echoed through the chamber. The War Council turned as a holographic display flickered to life. The screen showed something none of them had expected. An incoming fleet. But it was not human. It was something else. Something unknown. The shadow that watches. A deep voice crackled over the comms, harsh and guttural. Zarkan Empire. Earth, you waste time. The screen zoomed in on the approaching fleet. It was massive. Dozens of sleek, black warships, their hulls reflecting no light. Predators of the void. Reeves narrowed his eyes. Who are they? Zelver, the old Zarkan scholar, whispered in horror. The Varkai. A chill ran through the war chamber. Even Korak the Destroyer, who had mocked the idea of peace, looked uneasy. Vortok exhaled slowly. Impossible. The Varkai vanished centuries ago. Zelver shook his head. No, we merely hoped they had. The Varkai were the ghosts of the galaxy, a species spoken of only in hushed whispers. Unlike the Zarkans, who conquered to rule, the Varkai had no interest in ruling. They only destroyed. Reeves understood immediately. This is why you conquer, he said, looking at Vortok. Because if you don't, someone worse might come. Vortok's claws flexed. The human saw too much. A new message came through. Zarkans, humans, you speak of peace or war, but it does not matter. The stars belong to us. Your time is over. The room fell silent. For the first time, war was no longer a choice between two enemies. It was survival against extinction. The last offer. Reeves stepped forward. You wanted to test humanity, Commander Vortok. His voice was steady, unwavering. Vortok watched him. This is your test now. The Zarkan leader did not respond. His war council waited for his command. Would he choose war against the humans, or would he choose something no Zarkan leader had ever chosen before? Would he stand beside humanity? Reeves extended a hand. Make your choice, Supreme Commander. The echoes of war filled the chamber. And for the first time in history, a Zarkan's next move was unknown. The choice between fire and light. The silence inside Station Zyros was unbearable. Outside, the Varkai fleet hung in the void like a storm waiting to break. Their warships were unlike anything seen before, silent, black, and predatory. They did not demand surrender. They did not offer negotiations. They simply declared, your time is over. Inside the war chamber, the weight of the moment pressed down on Supreme Commander Vortok. His war council, once so sure of their path, now sat frozen in hesitation. And across from him, standing in the heart of an enemy stronghold, was Captain Daniel Reeves. A human, unarmed, but somehow the most dangerous man in the room. Reeves had given Vortok a choice: war against humanity or something greater. But now, there was no choice. The Varkai had come, and they would burn them all. The last instinct. Korak the Destroyer, the most feared general in the Zarkan Empire, finally spoke. "This is what we deserve." His voice was low, bitter. "We have spent centuries taking. Now something has come to take from us." Some of the War Council nodded in grim agreement. It was the way of things. Predators ruled until something stronger appeared. Vortok, however, remained silent. His claws drummed against the armrest of his throne. Then he spoke. "No." The single word stopped the room cold. Korak frowned. "No." Vortok's red eyes burned with something new, not rage, but revelation. "We spent our lives believing war was our strength," he said, "that we would rule until we were no longer strong enough." He looked at the holographic display of the Varkai fleet, dark, silent, inevitable. "And now we see the truth. War is not strength." The words felt strange in his mouth, but he spoke them anyway. War is a trap, a cycle. The War Council stiffened at his words. Was this doubt? Was this weakness? Or was it something far more dangerous? Reeves stepped forward. Then break the cycle. Vortok turned to him. "You are asking me to do something no Zarkan has ever done." Reeves didn't hesitate. "And if you don't, your people will never get the chance to do anything again." The human wasn't begging. He wasn't pleading. He was simply telling the truth. The first decision that mattered. Vortok exhaled. Then, slowly, he rose from his throne. The Zarkan warlords watched in stunned silence as he turned toward Reeves and extended his hand, the same hand that had crushed enemies, taken planets, ended wars. Now, for the first time, it was being offered. Reeves didn't hesitate. He shook it. The War Council erupted in disbelief. A Zarkan supreme commander, shaking the hand of a human. It was impossible. Yet it was real. Vortok's voice was steady. "We fight together." And just like that, history changed. The turning of the tide. The alarms inside Station Natyros blared as the Varkai ships moved into attack formation. Reeves turned to Vortok. "You made the right call. Now let's make sure it matters." The Supreme Commander nodded. He stepped forward, his voice filling the chamber. "Send the signal. Every Zarkan fleet, every warship." Korak clenched his fists. "To attack." Vortok shook his head. "To stand with them." For the first time in Zarkan history, their weapons would be pointed outward, not at their enemies, but at the real threat. Human and Zarkan. Side by side. The unbreakable spirit. The universe held its breath. In the cold abyss of space, the Varkai fleet moved like shadows, their black warships drifting without sound, without fear. They were the apex predators of the void, a force of pure annihilation. They did not conquer. They did not enslave. They erased. And now, they had come for the Zarkans. They had come for humanity. Inside Station Zyros, the impossible had already happened. Supreme Commander Vortok, leader of the most feared war empire in the galaxy, had extended his hand to a human. And Captain Daniel Reeves had shaken it. An alliance had been forged in the final hour, not through force, but through wisdom, through survival. Now, they had only one choice left: fight together or die alone. The first stand. The war alarms inside Station Zyros blared. Red lights flashed. Commanders barked orders. Zarkan warships moved into formation, their massive armored hulls adjusting to a defensive stance, something they had never done before. Zarkans did not defend. They attacked. But today, everything had changed. Reeves stood beside Vortok on the command deck, watching the Varkai fleet approach. "How many ships?" Reeves asked. A Zarkan officer's voice was tense. "Over 400. Vortok growled. "We have 200. Korak, The Zarkan general who had once demanded war against humanity now found himself speaking a different kind of battle plan. If we hold position near the station, we can. No, Reeves interrupted. They'll pick us apart. The Zarkan officers turned to him. Humans had never commanded their fleets before. They had never even stood in a Zarkan war chamber before today. But Reeves wasn't guessing. He knew war. They're testing us, he said. The Varkay never charge in. They'd break enemies piece by piece. Vortok studied the enemy formation. Reeves was right. So what do we do, human? Reeves turned, his expression calm but firm. We hit them first. The attack that shouldn't have happened. Zarkans did not fight like this. Their tactics were simple. Overwhelm, crush, dominate. But this time, they fought like humans. The first Zarkan warships moved in formation, striking before the Varkay could react. Energy cannons ignited the void, targeting weak points in enemy hulls. They weren't just attacking. They were thinking. The Varkay hesitated. They had studied the Zarkans before, fierce but predictable warriors. This was not predictable. For the first time in centuries, the Varkay fleet staggered. And in that moment, humanity struck. Out of the darkness, a second fleet emerged. Earth's Alliance Armada. Sleek, agile, deadly. Not as powerful as the Zarkans, but smarter. Human battle AI ran thousands of calculations per second, predicting enemy movements before they happened. Together, human strategy and Zarkan firepower, they did the impossible. They stopped the unstoppable. The price of survival. The battle raged for hours. Ships burned. Lives were lost. But for the first time, the Varkay faced something they had never encountered before. Resistance. Humanity had survived its own destruction many times before. The Zarkans had never backed down from an enemy. And now, they were something new. Something neither species had ever been before. Brothers in arms. Reeves stood on the bridge, sweat on his brow, watching as the Varkay fleet finally began to break formation. They were retreating. Not because they were weak, but because, for the first time, they had encountered something even more dangerous than themselves. Unity. Vortok exhaled, his war-torn hands gripping the railing. His empire had changed in a single battle. He turned to Reeves. You saved us. Reeves shook his head. No. He looked at the burning wreckage of the battlefield, at the Zarkan warships standing beside human vessels. We saved each other. For the first time in history, Zarkan warriors and human soldiers stood side by side, watching the dawn of something new. Something greater than war. Something unstoppable. The power of peace. The war should have been over. The Varkay fleet had retreated, their dark warships vanishing into the endless void. The Zarkans and humans had stood together, fought together, and survived together. But the scars of battle remained. Inside Station Zyros, the war chamber was filled with silent warriors, Zarkans who had spent their entire lives believing in conquest, and humans who had just proven that war was not the only path to survival. And in the middle of it all stood Supreme Commander Vortok and Captain Daniel Reeves. Enemies turned allies. But was that enough? The last war to end. Vortok turned to his war council. For the first time, they did not look to him for orders. They looked to him for answers. Korak, once the fiercest voice for war, now spoke words that no Zarkan had ever dared to say. What now? It was the question no one had ever asked before. For centuries, the Zarkans had conquered because it was all they knew. War had been their way of life, their identity. But war had almost destroyed them. And the only reason they had survived was peace. Vortok's claws tapped against the metal of his throne. His red eyes burned, not with rage, but with something far more dangerous. Understanding. This war, he said finally, his voice echoing through the chamber, was not won by weapons. He turned to Reeves. It was won by a choice. The room remained silent. Then, slowly, the Zarkan leader did something no supreme commander had ever done before. He bowed his head, not in surrender, not in weakness, but in respect. The dawn of a new empire. Reeves stepped forward, his expression calm. You have a chance, Commander. A chance to lead your people into something greater. Vortok nodded. Then we take it. The War Council murmured. The old ways were breaking, shattering like glass under the weight of something stronger. A future without conquest. A future without endless war. A future where the most feared empire in the galaxy was no longer feared, but respected. The final choice. Across the galaxy, the message spread. The Zarkan Empire had changed, not because they were defeated, but because they had chosen to evolve. And as their warships pulled away from Earth, no longer invaders but allies, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter. Because for the first time in history, the strongest weapon in the universe had not been firepower. It had been wisdom. Humanity had not just survived. They had taught the most feared warriors in the galaxy a lesson they would never forget. And peace, true peace, had finally begun.